Fistful of Lead, Bigger Battles. Tabletop wargaming rules for large-scale skirmishes throughout history and beyond by Wiley Games at wiley-games.com. This video is not sponsored. I just really like the game. I have had a hankering. Lately we've been doing a lot of videos about Age of Sail. One ship, two ships, red ship, blue ship. I wanted to get some serious miniatures on the table. Now this game is, it's Bigger Battles. We're going to see a lot more miniatures. That's a setup. This is Chekhov's gun. Doesn't quite work out as well as I'd hoped, but it'll be fine. I did want to point out one thing before we get started, though. The Fistful of Lead Bigger Battles takes the Fistful of Lead skirmish rules and upscales it a little bit, makes things a little more complicated, because now, sometimes, you are going to have to worry about flanking attacks. You're going to have to worry about whether to put your guys in close order or open order. You have to worry about different troop qualities, not just the standard D12, D10, D8, but there's also regular troops and irregular troops. There are tribal troops. All kinds of good stuff going on. Your commanders have extra abilities. It's a little more complicated. So let's take a look at what old Jay Wiley says here on building your units. Right here, right here. Wait, where is it? Oh, here we go. Each player will build a force of around 5 units and a commander. This is because that's around the amount most players can keep track of easily. There's my receipts. 5 is what most players can keep track of easily. Very true. Very true. I've got like 10. As a solo wargamer, this game has much to recommend it, but it really shines in the multiplayer, 2-player minimum. Because that 5 units is carefully calibrated to allow you to engage in some fairly complicated scenario play. I want to look at this scenario today. I want to walk through the troops and the abilities and all that stuff. We're probably not going to fight the battle. I just don't think we're going to have time. We're going to break this into a 2-parter because there's a lot of analysis that we can do as we go through the forces setup and this particular scenario. As I was saying, if you've got the 5 troops, this is great. This is the map that Jay gives us, page 46, Breakout, 6x4 playing area. I will be using my standard 2.5 by 2. We're playing at half scale, 15 millimeter. One of the forces, we're going to do the Broman Empire here. They're going to be setting up here at this bridge. They've just crossed the bridge. They're into this little village. They're trying to get off at point D. That is the roadway, center of the southern edge of the battlefield. The defenders, they're trying to escape. The pursuers have beat them in a battle, and I'm going to use the Dark Elves for this with a little bit of extra help. They have to put 1 unit at each of the 4 roads on the boundary. So if we can get 3 of the Broman units off the southern edge at D, they win. If we don't, then the Dark Elves win. Really interesting scenario design here, particularly with a couple of hills and woods blocking things, in a river here. So how do you do that? Which unit do you set up to try to hold the crossroads so that you can send the other 4 down south? You have to fight your way through before you can get anybody off. Do you send your powerful units down south first to clear the path? Do you send a delaying unit down so everybody else can run around, but maybe the pursuers coming in on these edges are going to get you? Great scenario design, whole lot of possibility for strategy, tactics, but of course, as usual, it's going to depend on the cards. Say hello to the Bromans. For those of you that don't know, this is a D10 based game. In the skirmish game, you roll a D10 when you fight, when you shoot. In this game, you're going to roll a D10 for every surviving guy on the board. Well, that's not quite true. If you're suffering from shock, so if this unit is fighting and they've got 2 dead guys and they've got 3 shock, then, there's 10 guys still standing, but they've got 3 shock. That means when they fight, they're only going to be rolling 7 dice, 10 minus 3. So managing shock is going to be very important, and that's where your commander comes in. The guy up here in the front is the commander. Generally, you're rolling a D10 against a target number, and in the case of the original Fistful of Lead, in shooting, you're rolling against a target number of, call it 8 if you're at long range, 5 if you're at close range. Same thing here, except you're going to roll 1 die for every guy that is still standing. In Melee, in the original game, it's a roll-off. Whoever rolls higher wins. In this, the attacker, so you got to charge into combat, that's important. The attacker rolls 1 die for everybody still standing and unshocked. Then you're trying to roll against a target number. Your regular troops are going to be hitting on, and I'm gonna check this. I wanna quote chapter and verse. Your regulars hit on a 5-up, your irregulars hit on a 6, and your tribals hit on a 4. So tribals are guys just, you know what that means, right? Orcs, or Zulus, or whatever. You get the idea. What you're looking at here on the table are regular troops for the mounted guys, and these guys are irregular. Okay, we're going to go through all the traits here in a little bit. We have 1 hero. Heroes, see, notice how there's 12 wounds here? The hero and the commander each have 3 wounds. Well, the commander has a trait that gives him 4 wounds. They roll 1 die for every wound they have. So when either of these guys gets in a fight, if this fella was fighting these 12, he would still make 3 attack rolls. Not great, right? But it's better than just the 1 for the 1 figure. And of course, they've got other power-ups. They really come in handy, particularly your commander, because when your commander is attached to a unit, the whole unit gets the traits that he has, where appropriate. As I mentioned, the commander of the Bromans here has 3 wounds. They don't all get 3 wounds. Just put that aside. Instead, and his name is Captain Christian Hillcross, by the way. What he does have is veteran. He rolls a d12 on all of his rolls. When he tries to hit, obviously not when he tries to shoot, he doesn't have any bow weapons. But whenever he takes a wound, or whenever he hurts other people, he makes the wound roll. He's rolling a d12. These guys, hey, wait a second, Mr. Wargaming. You said that there were going to be 5 units, and I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. What gives? What kind of game are you trying to play here? What kind of cheating are you trying to do? Well, I'm not trying to cheat. If I get things wrong, it's because I just, forgot. There's a lot going on here, guys. Settle down. But the other thing is, these 2 spear units are not regular units. They're irregular. They are green. They roll d8s when they attack. And that's both to hit and to wound. Could be a real problem. Rolling d8s, they need a 6 or better to hit. That's not great. But if the commander is standing attached to them, then when they fight, they're all going to be rolling d12s. Huge power up. The problem is that as a free action, the commander can, he gives a +1 to rally. So if we want to take a turn, catch some breath, try to remove some of those shock markers, he can do that. But he can't do that if he's focused on directly leading these guys by the noses. Interesting decisions, interesting trade-offs there, and then he will move and do stuff with them. So that's interesting, and that's kind of how leaders work. Now we'll see more about how they work specifically when the game starts. But there's another thing I should say. Oops, I misspoke. I said that's how leaders work. I meant that's how commanders work. There's also a thing called leaders, but let's stick a pin in that for a moment. Let's just go over all the abilities that we're looking at here. The heavy cavalry back here, I've got 6 in each. And the game is fairly loose. For those of you that aren't familiar with this, you kind of have to look at the thing and kind of squint and balance it, kind of figure it out. There's no point costs. Normally, when you build a force, you say, okay, look, I've got a leader, my commander. He's got 3 traits. And in this case, my commander he's wearing armor. It gives him an 8-up save, so he can reduce the effect of those wound rolls. He's tough, as I said. He's got 4 wounds. He's a veteran. And those are his 3 traits. He also has a 2-handed sword. 2-handed swords are great. When he hits somebody, he gets a +1 on his wound roll. How does a wound roll work? Well, let's see. On a 1 through 5, you deliver a shock. On a 6 through 8, you remove a miniature. And on a 9-up, you remove 2 miniatures. Hey, that's pretty good. Of course, for him, it's 1 through 4, because he's got the +1, right? And there's also the special abilities can give you a little bump there as well. For example, let's take a look at our cavalry. I got 2 units of cavalry here, one with lances. And the lances are great because if you charge into battle, you get to re-roll misses. They are armored. They got that 8-up save, and they have thunderous charge. So when they charge in, they get the +1 to their 2 hit rolls. So they're going to be hitting on 4s instead of 5s. Wow, that's really good. Oh, the lance is true all the time, I think. I think I'm going to play that it's only on the charge. Because once lances are in melee, you know, that they don't do so hot. Standing to their immediate right are medium cavalry. Now, those are brawlers. They get to reroll all of their melee dice. They have a thing called Flurry of Blows. If they attack your unit and the only results are shock, then they drive your unit back. So when you win a melee, you drive the opposing unit back, 1 move. And these guys get to immediately make a follow-up move and a second attack. That's pretty sweet. That's a pretty good power-up. Now these 2 units both are rolling d10s because they are regulars. The hero there, that's Captain Ripping Heater, a chance for Captain of the Broman Empire to show his mettle. He is rock steady. He is never forced back. If he loses a combat, you have to step back 1 inch. He's armored, 2-handed sword. He's got 3 wounds. That's pretty much it. So he gets 2 power-ups. And we took rocksteady and armored. So that's our secondary. Then it comes down to these 2 rabble. And because we downgraded them from regulars to irregulars, because we downgraded them from just normal to green, they're rolling d8s, yeah, I get 2 of them. And that kind of complicates things because these guys are trying to get off the map. Remember that map I showed you? You have to get half of your units. Well, I'm going to count each of these as a half a unit. So if I get my 2 knights and 1 of these off the table, I didn't win. We're going to call that a draw. You got to get both of these units off, and they have to be at greater than half strength. So if you can kill 7 of these guys, they don't count. All right? That's how we're going to do this. And again, then the question becomes, who do you sacrifice to slow down the process? These 2 rabble units are so brittle, probably not a great idea, unless you leave your commander, in which case you got to get all 3 of those units, the knights and the hero, off the table. We are going to be dealing with some very interesting options here, but the rabble does get a power-up. They get 1 trait. I actually took quick. They get an extra 2 inches of movement. That's 1 inch for me because I'm playing at half scale. They have spears, and spears have a little special ability that we'll get to in a minute. But I think the speed is really going to help us out. Interestingly enough, they move at the same speed as the horsies do. The horsies are regular, but mounted troops in this game move at, let's see, what does it say here? Oh, irregular mounted. They're regular mounted. They move 8 inches. The irregular foot moves 6, but because they're chickens, because they've got a lot of motivation to stay motivated, to keep running south, that's why we gave them the little boost. And then spears have a special ability too, but it's oddly complicated. It has something to do with mounted figures. Oh, I know what it is. Mounted figures that attack these 2 units are at -1 on their combat. So again, if you're at +1 because you've got the lances fighting spears, even Stevens, you don't get that bump, that little plus extra. Anything else we should talk about? I don't think so. Everybody else has regular weapons. No, there is one more thing we should talk about because there's a fun little chart here. See, I've got 2 units of spears, okay? And this is important. There's a purple and there's a red. See these spears? See the little banners here? These banners are the leaders of the unit. And the purple and the red are going to have different characteristics. As an optional rule, you can allow your units to have leaders of their own. The guys with the banners are the most obvious, and they are a visual cue as to which of the figures is the leader. Now, that's going to be important because when you take wounds, you have to roll a d10. And if you roll less than the number of wounds that the unit took in that combat, one of the figures that goes down is the leader, and you'll lose the ability or the penalty that your leader comes with. I believe the intention here is that each unit has a leader. Well, I'm not going to do that for all of the units on the table. As I said, I already have way too many traits to keep track of. Adding another 4 to this force is just going to be way over the top. But I am going to add 2, 1 for each of those rabble units, and there will be a couple of units on the other side, on the op 4, that will do the same thing. So I'm going to roll for the red and the purple. So for red, we get a 05, and for the purple, we get an 58. 05, handsome bloke. Oh, that's relatable. Good looking, but no other discernible capabilities. And for a 58, we get a... Oh, there it is. He is stalwart. +1 to rally. You can't see that. Here we go. Stalwart, just so you know, I got showing the receipts. +1 to rally rolls. And I went ahead and looked back at the commanders, and it turns out that your commanders have some other power-ups. Anytime a unit is within 12 inches of your commander, they get a +1 to their rally checks. Listen, it's like other games, right? You know how this works. If they get driven back, if there's more shock markers than figures on the board, they have to make these rally checks. It's just a task roll. 6 are better for the rabble, 5 are better for the regulars. He gives them a +1. If he's close, if he's attached, he gives +2 in addition to the other stuff we talked about. But if he's attached, then he doesn't count as being 12 inches away. Blah, blah, blah. You get the idea. You know how this works. But the key here is that the guys with the red banner, and I forgot whether it was red or purple. It doesn't matter. So I'm just going to make a little note here that red equals +1 to rally. And that does stack with the leader's unit. So that's it. There's your Bromans. And where are they going to deploy? Well, let's take a look at the opposition force. And then we're going to play a little mini game when we do the deployment. And we're going to call it quits. We're already like 12 minutes into this video. This is why I'm breaking it up into 2 parts. Chud's the Dark Elf. He is Chaz the Elf's younger brother. Chaz is a rather controversial figure in one of my friend's D&D campaigns. He keeps trying to take over the central portions of cities, and it never really goes well. He is definitely an elf supremacist, and one of the reasons we don't like elves. This particular elf, Chud's, is, as you can see, he's riding on a cold fell beast lizard thing. He's a hero. He's got the extra wounds. He's a master. He rolls 2 dice instead of when he's in combat. Actually, I should write that down. Combat master in melee. So again, he's got 3 wounds. He rolls 3 dice when he attacks. Picks the best of those 3. But because he is a combat master, he gets to roll 6 dice and take the best 3. Kind of a badass. He's also armored. He's also, what else do we got? 2-fisted. So he can make an attack roll against every figure. If he goes up against those spear guys, he doesn't just roll 1 die for each of his remaining wounds. He rolls 1 die for each of the remaining enemies. And oh, by the way, he gets to roll twice as many in that case because these things stack. They can be wildly unbalanced. That's half of the fun of this game, is looking for those killer combos. And, beating your friends over the head with them. I don't mind it. It's fine. He also gets to ignore terrain for movement. It's called Ranger. But he is brittle. Now, he's got a lot of traits. I bought brittle. That means when you wound him, you get a +1 to your wound roll. He is going to take a shock on a 1 through 4. And he is going to take 2 wounds on an 8-up instead of a 9-up. Yikes. Super yikes. Hey, wait a minute. Mr. Wargaming. There's only 4 units here. Yeah, that's right. This guy here, this is Erdna the Giant. He counts as 2. He is that huge. He has 12 wounds. Now, he is irregular, so he's only hitting on 6s. He can throw rocks. He's got a range of 12 inches for short range, 24 for long range. I think we're just going to roll that he rolls. I don't think he throws 12 rocks, to be honest with you. But he is large, so if you shoot at him, it doesn't really matter, does it? I don't have any shooty boys on the other side. He has Flurry of Blows, which we've already seen before. The Flurry of Blows means whenever he gets in a fight and he only does shock, and he wins the battle, so he drives you off, he can immediately make a second attack. Oh, he doesn't even have to drive you off, now that I think about it. If all he does is shock, he can immediately make another attack. That's a whole lot of dice in melee. He is absolutely terrifying. He's also ferocious, so when he does hit you, he's a giant, for crying out loud. He's going to get a +1 on those wound rolls. Anything else I'm missing there? Nah, that's about it. The Elf Spear and the Elf Bow, these are our normalish units, and they are, so the Spear are armored, the little Ranger bows here are not. They are Rangers, they ignore terrain. They're also infiltrators. Oh, isn't that interesting? they get a free 12-inch move at the start of the game. 6 inches, right? Because half skill, half speed. These spear boys, in addition to having spears, and again, when they go up against oh man, spears, that's terrible. What a good matchup for these guys. They're defensive fighters. Oh, these are the guys. When they win a combat and you run away, they can make a charge and follow up and make a second attack. So I think I got something wrong there. What was I thinking of? Oh, I was thinking of the flurry of blows. No, flurry of blows is when you're in melee. You're not done until you make that second attack. But these guys, they're defensive fighters. So if they win combat, if they drive you off, if you have to pull back one move, they get to follow up. And that's kind of rough. But they are kind of slow. Now, these guys are armored, as I said, and they only move 3 inches per turn. They're not so fast. And again, these come directly from the rule book. But look, notice that I've got a little yellow ball and a little blue ball on top of these elves. That means I get to roll on the leader chart again. And we'll roll for the spears first. And on a result of a 24, I'm not going to show you the book. Get your own copy. But if you don't believe me, you can do a little quality assurance, quality control on me. Leaders with a roll of a 24, he is a coward. The first time his unit takes a casualty, roll a d10. On a 6-up, he deserts his unit. Oh, isn't that appropriate? The yellow, so the spear guy, is led by a coward. And then the rangers here, now they do have bows. They have little hand crossbows, but we're just going to call those bows. They have a range of 9 inches and 18 inches. We get a result there of a 70, so the leader there is... He is a fine fellow, nothing more. All right, good. So we have one more trait for this unit. First time they take casualties, there's a good chance that their leader just scuppers off. And here is our table. The Bromans set up here in town. And as you can see, they have opted to lead with their heavy punchers. Probably no surprise there. They are at a slight disadvantage because they don't know who is coming on where. Having seen this deployment with the mounted units driving due south, the Dark Elves kind of have the initiative here. They get to decide who is deploying where. They've dropped the hero up here on the bridge to kind of delay whoever comes up off that north side. So if you were the Dark Elves, how would you deploy here? Let's just take a moment to play the Jeopardy theme song and decide who is your powerful force that you want down here blocking this southern route. Now, one thing we didn't talk about yet is the fact that regular units can close ranks like this. You have to have at least 2 ranks to have this effect. When you do that, there are certain rules that kick in. Certain effects take place. In the Black Powder era, if you're shot at when you're like this, that's bad. It's a lot easier to hurt you when you're like this. Cannons will just absolutely devastate you. Remember, spear guys, they're just peasants. They're just rabble. They can't do that. They are stuck in irregular format. If the Dark Elf bow unit closes ranks, when they fire, on the other hand, if you get hit in the flank, if someone charges you in the flank, they get a +1 to hit you because your flanks are vulnerable. Same thing for the rear. I guess one other thing I should point out is if you have a friendly unit within 6 inches of your unit, this is really important. Having secure flanks is such a bonus in this game. You get a +1 to hit if a unit has a friendly unit within 1.5 inches in our case. In other words, to kind of put this in practice, if this unit is fighting a unit to its forward, because there's a unit within 1.5 inches, they get an extra +1. That's kind of nice. I gotta remember that. So have you decided yet? Who would you put to defend this southern pass? I think there's really only one choice here. I think you have to put your spears. We're going to drop them right on the table. They enter, so we're just going to put them right here, and we'll say it costs 1 of their actions. When your card is drawn, you get 2 actions. Their first action is going to be just to come onto the board. But we'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and we will allow them to come on the board in close order. I'll put them in 2 lines of 6. That'll be fine. And then I don't think it really matters so much here which side, because the Bromans went with a symmetric deployment. We're going to put our giant coming in over here on the east. We'll put our shooters. Oh boy, now that's an interesting question. Do we put the commander? We only have 2 other units. Do we put the commander over here or over here? I think you got to put the commander there. We're going to try to race him down to support these guys, and we can put the shooty boys up there. That will allow the shooty boys to make a pincushion out of that hero, and then they can race forward into the town and just start laying waste to people, or maybe even drop them over here. They're only going to have a range of 9 inches, but that should take them clear across the town. So any laggards, anybody falling behind, is just going to get riddled with shot. We'll bring them on in close order. That's going to give them the +1 to shoot. To give the Bromans a little bit of help here, we'll say that this bridge does block line of sight, as of course does the houses. We didn't really talk about that, right? The hill blocks line of sight. The houses, we've got some woods here that movement is by half, but again, remember, these guys ignore terrain penalties. They can't cross the stream, so that might be a good reason to put them over here, because they could rush down through the woods, set up camp, but I'm not going to worry about that. It does kind of negate their ability, but I really like the idea of forcing this hero to move up, to pin them in place, and just, if we can buy a couple of turns, maybe these guys get out of the way. And then our leader, of course, is over here. A little bit vulnerable. I got to double check the rules for interpenetration. That could be the key to this battle. Now, we're not going to fight this battle today. We're going to look at that probably next week. But I think it's shaping up to be a really interesting exercise in choices and consequences. And, of course, the wildly unpredictable nature of the deck of cards, which makes this a fun solo game. I don't have to think about who to move first. The cards are going to tell me that. And then I have to think about what's the best thing to do with this particular unit given the current table state. There's a few other things we didn't really talk about. If they come up, we'll talk about them next week. Till then, I'm praying for you.